Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we're going to be talking about a short story that I found in this anthology. And it is called Over an Absinthe Bottle by W.C. Morrow, William Chambers Morrow. I'm going to give a quick synopsis. The story starts with a man who has obviously been most of his life very well off, but somehow he has become destitute, and that's where we start. And there's no explanation given as to why. We just start with a gentleman who somehow has fallen into such bad times that he hasn't eaten in days, and he's barely had enough water, and he is, it seems like, really on the verge of death. And Morrow handles this very well, because at one point he says he doesn't realize there's helping hands all around him, which I found interesting. Like somehow this guy's pride or his well-off culture doesn't allow him to know where to go in order to continue to survive in his new circumstances. But these are his new circumstances, and he is falling apart, and he decides that he's going to turn to thievery, and he's poking around restaurants trying to figure out what to do, and he sees this man standing in the door of, I think, a steakhouse or a gambling club or a club, like an 1880s, 1890s club, like a gentleman's club, I guess. I've said club way too many times now. So he sees this person standing out, and the person is very sallow and pale, and is wearing black clothes, and are kind of gentlemen fallen on bad times, can't stop staring at him, and eventually the man walks over to him and says, "Hey, come inside and let's play a game." And he's like, "Okay, I got nothing else to do." So they go inside and they get a booth, and these booths are like little rooms with tables in them, and you can shut the door of the booth and lock it, and it's basically its own little room. So they sit down, and this man is very strange. He just stares ahead at things. He almost seems inhuman. And the whole time in my brain I was like, what is this guy? And the guy says to him, "Go get us a bottle of absinthe and then we'll play our game." And he hands this poor destitute man $20, which is huge, of course. And he leaves the booth, and he's thinking, how many meals can I buy with this $20? But in the end, he decides to be honorable and goes and gets his bottle of absinthe. And when he comes back, he's pulling out the change, and the guy says, "Keep it. This is going to be part of the game. We're going to start with wagers." And they start playing a dice game, and it never really goes into detail how this game works, because it doesn't really matter. But they start playing this dice game, and he does well for a while, and then the pale stranger, does well for a while, and it keeps on going back and forth until this final wager, where there's something like $47,000 on the table split between them, and they're going to do a wager for it all. And the story ends in a wild and eerie Strange Tales sort of way. It's really, really worth a read. I wouldn't be surprised if Horror Babble has done it. If they have, I will put a link in the description. It reminded me of traditional tales going way back, playing chess with the devil, or any type of games with death, cards with death, right? This is kind of a folk tradition that goes way back, and this reminded me of that a little bit, although it is definitely different than that. That is not, while that is, I think, the general theme, it is not that. That's not what this story is, and I'll spoil it in just a minute, but I'll let you know beforehand so you can go give it a read. So now let's talk about W.C. Morrow's himself and the publication of this story. Morrow was writing mainly from the 1880s to about the turn of the century. So he was writing with people like Ambrose Bierce and then later Robert W. Chambers. And Ambrose Bierce actually was a fan of Morrow and really helped get him published. So he's very early for weird tales, but I do feel that he falls very well into that category. He wrote for quite a while, and then he eventually gave it up to teach writing right around the turn of the century. And there is a quote by Ambrose Bierce about Morrow ceasing to write and becoming a teacher of writing that is just fantastic. I gotta read it to you. So Bierce says, "It is a pity Morrow teaches others to write badly instead of himself writing well, but I fancy we have no grievance therein, or if we have, it is against the pig public, not against Morrow. He would write books, doubtless, if he could afford to, as I would do." Yeah, it's an interest. There's so much to that comment because, of course, there's the old adage, those who cannot do teach, which I think is extremely unfair, as I think that Bierce points out in saying that the real problem is that he is not well loved enough to be able to afford to continue to write. He's not a bad writer. He just isn't exactly what the public was looking for at the time. Anyway, we're going to be talking about the story over an absinthe bottle, which was first published in the Argonaut, January 2nd, 1893. So he probably wrote it in 1892. It was then published in a collection of short works of Morrow's that was put together by Lippincott Publishers, and that was called The Ape, the Idiot, and Other People, which is a book that is now on my list to find, which is apparently very rare and very hard to get. It wasn't published in the 1900s until Weird Tales published it in April 1933. And the cover there was done by J. Allen St. John. And then it wasn't published again until 1969 in Hauntings and Horrors, 10 Grisly Tales, edited by Alden H. Norton. But it's kind of a rare story, kind of a hard-to-find story. And it is a really wild story. There's a lot of really good going on here. First, the prose is great. It's very well written. It's artistic, but not hard to read. And the characters are very well developed. Our main gentleman, you really get the sense, not that just he is destitute now, but that he used to not be destitute. And he does that with a very economical use of language, just small little things we get throughout the story, like if he didn't realize that there was helping hands all around him. He just didn't know where they were. But the description of the pale stranger is absolutely incredible. I'm going to get into a tiny bit of spoilers here, but not the main big twist spoiler yet. So you don't have to jump ship yet if you haven't read it. So while they're playing this game, they get to the final roll, and they're just everything against everything. The huge, they each have like $20-something thousand in their stack, and they do a final roll, and the pale stranger wins, which of course is devastating for our destitute gentleman. But the minute he wins, he just locks eyes with the gentleman and won't stop staring at him. And he doesn't blink, and he's just so pale. And our gentleman begins to feel like he's looking through him. So he just sits there, super confused under this weird, demonic stare. And then he hears the people in the booth behind him. And the people in the booth behind him turn out to be two detectives. And they say, witnesses saw him come into this building. They know it's him because they described how pale he was. course, and they explain through through clever exposition that he is an escapee from prison and that he recently robbed a bank very blazingly for something like $40-something thousand. I think that was the amount. So then he's like, holy shit, this is a bank robber I'm sitting across from. This is really crazy. But he doesn't just get up and leave. He starts organizing the money, counting it out into stacks, and he organizes this money beautifully. And he leans aside while he's doing this, and this guy just keeps his stare on him. It's really crazy. So finally, he picks up all the money, and he starts putting it into pockets in his clothes. And he stands up, he unlocks the door of the booth, walks out, and the next 3 pages or so are really beautifully written because it's just him thinking about how much of a giving life he's going to lead from here on out, how much he's going to find the next 10 hungry people he can and get them all steak dinners, and he's going to leave an $1,000 tip at the next place he goes to get food, and he can feel the food and he thinks about food, and it's absolutely beautiful. If you've ever been hungry and know of the daydreams of food, then you know what is described so perfectly in these pages. And he just kind of runs off, and we're very happy for him. Here comes the biggest twist. This is a great story. You should give it a read, but here comes the biggest twist. We cut to the police who are trying to find this bank robber. And they left after the gentleman overheard him. They were like, well, we can't find him now, so they left. And then he snuck out with the money. But the police, unable to find any more clues, come back to the restaurant or the club, and they check the booths, and one of them is locked, which I was instantly confused about. But they open the door. They get the keys from the manager and open the door, and they open it up, and there are 2 men in the booth staring right at each other, just across the table at each other. And there is $47,000 neatly arranged on the table between them, and they are both very dead. Really awesome Weird Tales type of twist. I absolutely loved it. It was glorious and very well written, very well done. I'd never heard of this writer. I'm glad I have now. His most popular short story, and the one that's anthologized the most by him, is called His Unconquerable Enemy, which was published in 1889. And this description is insane. It's about the implacable revenge of a servant whose limbs have been amputated on the orders of a cruel Raja. I'm going to check that one out. This guy doesn't seem to be talked about very often, but here we go. W.C. Morrow. What a wild, wild story that was. Absolutely worth a read. Over an absinthe bottle. Check it out if you get the chance, and thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, go check out our Patreon, and if you like this video, click like, comment, and we will see you on the next one.